Welcome back, everybody, to the live webinar. Apologies for what happened on Monday. It seemed to be some sort of technical difficulties. Hopefully they're fixed. We'll find out today. So last week we spoke a little bit about Shabbos, about Shalom Aleichem, and a few people commented to me that it is amazing to get some depth into things that we have been doing for so long, since practically we have been born. But yet we don't have the meaning for it, or we don't know the reasons for it. And it's sometimes very enlightening to discover reasons for things which we do so often, and not so often do we know the reasons for them. So I thought of two examples of such a thing, and that is eating gefilte fish on Shabbos and eating cholent. So let's see how far we go today. We'll try and discuss both of them, but let's start off with gefilte fish. Gefilte fish, there's many different ways to make gefilte fish, and definitely not my field of expertise, but the bottom line is that gefilte fish is a type of fish which the whole fish is crushed. There are no bones. If you eat a piece of salmon, there are bones. Gefilte fish, there's no bones because the whole thing is put into a food processor. Nowadays, olden days, I imagine it just crushed it, and it all becomes one big lump, and you either bake it, or you boil it, or however you make the gefilte fish. The bottom line is that there's no bones. What is the reason for this custom? Why did this come to be, that Jews have been eating gefilte fish for who knows how long? Besides for, that's what my grandmother did, and it tastes very good, there probably is some more depth and meaning to it. So let's first of all discuss the halachic reason, the halachic source, or the halachic cause of this custom, and then we'll see some spiritual depth and meaning to it. So we all know that there are 39 melachos, 39 works which are forbidden to do on Shabbat. They're not only 39 things forbidden, these are 39 categories of works. Each one of these categories could be subdivided, etc., to many different we call tultis, different subcategories, and hundreds and thousands of details in each one of these malachas. One of the lamates malachas is boirer. Boirer means to separate or to select. The most classic example of boirer is when you have one thing that you don't want, one thing that you do want, and they're all mixed together. So let's say you have a salad and you don't like lettuce, but the salad has lettuce. So what are you going to do? You're going to take and you're going to separate the lettuce. That is actually something which is forbidden to do on Shabbat. You are not allowed to take the lettuce out of the salad because that would be selecting. Now, all of these lamates malachas, all of these 39 malachas, the reason why we don't do them is all because what they used to do when they built the Mishkan, etc. Anyway, this is also one of the things they used to do. They used to select, and therefore it is forbidden to select. An example for that would be bones in the fish. What are you going to do if your fish has bones inside? You can't take the bones out of the fish. Now, there is an option how to get out of boirer, how to get out of this problem of selecting on Shabbos, and that is if you do it not in the way of selecting, rather in the way of eating. So the halachic criteria for this is, and this is a very detailed discussion, but the basic idea is that number one, it has to be done right before you eat it. Number two, you have to take the good from the bad and not the bad from the good. So in this case, you would have to take the fish from the bones, not the bones from the fish. And it has to be done with your hand or a more simple utensil, not a special utensil designated for separating. If you do all these three things, then it's okay. But it's very annoying to start picking the fish from the bones and start to worry about it. So Jews came up with this unbelievable idea. Let's make gefilte fish. Let's crush the fish. No more bones. No more problem of selecting on Shabbat. Now, for those of you hearing about this for the first time, and even if this is not the first time you're hearing about this idea of selecting, you may be puzzled. Why is it forbidden to select on Shabbat? I mean, we understand maybe perhaps why you're not allowed to light fires, you're not allowed to cook, maybe you're busy, it takes too much time to work. What is the problem of selecting things on Shabbat? Why is God bothered that one day a week we shouldn't select? We shouldn't take bones out of the fish, we should only take the fish out of the bones, or we should make a gefilte fish. Why is this such an important issue? And the reason for this is based on understanding really what Shabbat is all about. This world was created in a state of concealment. God is concealed. We don't have a revelation of God's presence in this world. Our job, generally speaking, is to discover and to reveal God within the creation. But in order to do that, we need to, so to speak, select. We need to throw away the bad and take the good. We need to decide what is just plain out physical and not godly, discard of that, and then reveal the godliness within creation, because generally speaking, the physical world around us is a contradiction to godliness, and therefore we need to separate ourselves from the physical world in order to reveal the godliness within it. We cannot always use out everything that's physical in order to serve God. Sometimes we need to select, we need to separate the good, the godliness from within, from the bad, the physical, more coarse part of that entity. And that goes for everything. That goes for food, that goes for any experience we have in life. We normally, during the weekday, when the world is a concealment on God, we need to sort of discard the physical and reveal the spiritual. There's one day a week where there's no need to select. There's no need to throw away the physical, and that is Shabbat. Because on Shabbat, the physical world is not a contradiction anymore to the spiritual. We always wish each other Shabbat Shalom. We mentioned this last week. Shabbos of peace. Why is peace associated with Shabbat? Because Shabbat is a time when the physical and the spiritual come together. There's no contradiction anymore. Everything reveals God on Shabbat. We eat, it becomes a mitzvah, it becomes holy. And that is the spiritual source for the Jewish law that selecting is forbidden on Shabbat, because Shabbat is not a time for selecting. Shabbat is not a time to discard the bad from the good, because there is no bad on Shabbat. Everything is godly on Shabbat. Everything is good. And that is the spiritual meaning behind eating gefilte fish, which the source of that is the law of that it is forbidden to select on Shabbat. The reason for that is because selecting is not our job on Shabbat. That is the job of the week. On Shabbat, everything is holy. Where does Cholent come from? Cholent is an interesting one. I'm sure there's spiritual meaning to it as well, but there's a very big lesson from the concept of Cholent. Cholent can be anything. That's the truth. I mean, it depends which community you go to. Ashkenazim have a certain type of Cholent. Sephardim have what they call chamim. But the bottom line is, what is Cholent? It's something that has been cooking from before Shabbos. It has to be a certain amount cooked before Shabbos, whatever the case is, but it's been cooking from before Shabbos, left on the stove to burn, to cook, not to burn, but to cook, all the way till you eat it on Shabbat day. Why do we do this? Why can't we just eat cold food? Why do we have this emphasis on making a food which we've been cooking from Erev Shabbat, from Friday? Well, one reason could be because it tastes better when it's hot, but there's much more deeper meaning to it. And the reason is as follows. It says in the Torah, in fact, the only prohibition on Shabbat, which is clear in the Torah, everything else is derived. The only prohibition which is clear is that you're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbat. However, the expression that Torah uses doesn't actually say you're not allowed to light a fire. It almost seems to imply that a fire should not be burning on Shabbat. That is the literal translation. But we of course know that together with the written Torah comes the oral Torah, the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral tradition given to us by our sages, derived by our sages, learnt by our sages, to explain the written Torah. And they learned out and explained that it does not mean that you can't have a fire burning, it means that you're not allowed to light a fire. But if the fire is burning from before Shabbos, if the pot is on the stove from before Shabbat, it's not a problem. There were those throughout history who doubted the oral law, who doubted the oral tradition. And they said, we take everything it says in the Torah literally. So for example, it says in the Torah to put on tefillin between your eyes. Now literally that means between your eyes. So we should put on tefillin over here. But we don't. Because our sages have a tradition that it means opposite your eyes, over here on your forehead, in between your eyes. But these people used to put on tefillin between their eyes, because that's what it says in the Torah. But they didn't realize that the Torah comes together with the oral law. The oral law is just as holy as the written Torah. And you need both. One without the other is nothing. In order to truly understand the written Torah, you need the oral law. Therefore, these people used to always eat cold food on Shabbat. Because they held that when the Torah says you can't light a fire, it means you can't even have a fire burning. Therefore, to show that we don't agree with them, to prove them wrong, to show that we hold dear the words of our sages, the words of Torah Shebaal Peh, we specifically eat something hot on Shabbat day that has been cooking the whole Shabbat from before Shabbat, to prove the sanctity and the truth of Torah Shebaal Peh. So we actually make a whole dish in order to celebrate our belief in Torah Shebaal Peh, in the oral law. And it's a long discussion, the concept of the oral law, but I think one of the lessons of this is, or one of the things we need to understand. A lot of times when people hear, this it says clearly in the Torah, this is, the rabbis derived it, the sages derived it from the Torah and the Talmud. Sometimes people look at that as like a lesser level. It's like, okay, that's only the sages. That's not what the Torah actually says, though. That's a very big incorrect understanding of how Torah works. Now's not the time to get into this, but Torah works as one. There's only one Torah. The written Torah, the oral Torah, they go together. You cannot learn the written Torah without the oral law. If you learn the written Torah without the oral Torah, it's not that you made a mistake in the meaning of it, you just haven't learned it. Because it is impossible to understand the true meaning of what the written Torah is trying to tell you without learning commentary, without learning the Talmud, without learning the Mishnah, without learning Halakha, without understanding what the written Torah is trying to imply. That is what we do, and that is what we're celebrating when we eat Cholent on Shabbos. Have a wonderful day, and Shabbat Shalom.